"You can't stop my ex from coming to visit me. I'm not your slave," Megan said, her voice sharp in the marble kitchen, her eyes challenging Nathan Cole as he set down his coffee mug with a steady hand, taking in the room with its polished countertops, the soft morning light spilling across the hardwood floor, a subtle reminder of the stability and order he had built over the years. Nathan's expression remained calm, almost unreadable, as he listened to her, the words hanging in the air like a wait. Yet behind that calm lay the careful calculations of a man who had spent decades structuring his life, his finances, and his home to withstand surprises just like this. He leaned against the kitchen island, folding his arms and taking a slow breath, thinking of the post-nuptial agreement signed years ago that quietly insured the house. The accounts and the assets remained under the trust he controlled. Megan's smirk did nothing to unsettle him, though he could sense her confidence, a mix of arrogance and assumed dominance. He had seen this before in partners who believed they could bend circumstances to their will. Nathan recalled the countless nights working late in the office, organizing contracts, tracking investments, and building the foundation that allowed him to remain composed in moments of tension like this. The sound of Derek Lawson's name in Megan's tone echoed faintly in his mind, a reminder of the third party who believed he could intimidate Nathan or sway the situation. Nathan simply nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and said, "Then we should make sure the rules are clear," his words calm, precise, and deliberate. A contrast to the fiery challenge she had issued. Megan's eyes narrowed slightly, as if to probe for weakness, while Nathan reached for the notebook he had placed on the counter that morning, flipping it open to a clean page and starting to jot down notes about timing, communications, and previous agreements. The act itself a signal of his composed approach. He did not need to shout, to gesture, or to threaten. Every motion was controlled, purposeful, and designed to maintain authority while gathering clarity. Megan stepped closer, the heels of her shoes clicking softly against the floor, and she gestured toward the back door, implying Derek's arrival. Nathan's gaze followed her hand, then returned to the notebook, recording the implied intentions, the potential violation of trust, and the timing of the visit, every detail noted. Cross-referenced in his mind with the legal framework he had established, he imagined how Patricia Reed, his attorney, would advise, confirming that he was prepared to act within the law, ensuring that any missteps by Megan or Derek would not escape the consequences already built into the system. The morning light continued to spill across the kitchen, illuminating the counter, the notebook, and Nathan's calm posture, while Megan, expecting a reaction of shock or anger, received instead a quiet determination, a subtle reminder that control did not require confrontation, only patience, foresight, and meticulous preparation. Nathan flipped the page, adding a line about potential documentation and notices, and then looked directly at Megan, letting his composed presence convey that while she might feel she had power in the moment, the structure of the house, the trust, and the legal safeguards were already in place, ready to respond. The kitchen, the countertop, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the soft clatter of utensils became the stage for this silent battle, a test of will and awareness, and Nathan, fully aware of every detail, every nuance, and every implication, allowed Megan to have her words while he quietly mapped the path forward, understanding that the culmination of patience, preparation, and calculated action would ensure that he maintained both authority and control, while allowing the narrative to unfold exactly as designed. Nathan Cole watched Megan turn away from the kitchen island like the conversation had already been settled, like the house itself had voted in her favor because her name appeared on holiday cards and charity invitations. She walked into the open living room, one hand moving across the back of the white leather sofa, then toward the tall windows facing the pool, as if each expensive surface proved her point. "This is my home too," she said, not looking back. Nathan did not argue. He followed at an easy pace, the notebook still in his hand, his coffee cooling behind him on the marble counter. The chandelier above the dining area caught the morning light and broke it into small, bright pieces across the hardwood floor. He remembered choosing it after Megan said the old fixture made the room feel ordinary. He remembered the custom cabinets, the imported tile, the landscaping plan, the pool heater she insisted on because spring nights in Indiana were too chilly. Every corner held a memory, Every memory had a receipt. That was the part Megan never cared to understand. A home could feel shared without being legally simple. A lifestyle could look effortless while standing on contracts, trusts, insurance policies, business accounts, and signatures most people ignored until the day those signatures started speaking. Nathan looked at the framed wedding photo on the console table. Megan in ivory, smiling under a row of white roses. Him in a navy suit, younger, hopeful, convinced that protecting assets and protecting love could live in separate rooms. Back then, Patricia Reed had told him to keep the house inside the family trust. She had said emotion makes terrible paperwork. Nathan had laughed at that. Now the sentence came back with teeth. Megan stopped near the fireplace and crossed her arms. "Derek is not some stranger," she said. "He knew me before you did." Nathan wrote that down. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because wording mattered. Derek was not a plumber coming to fix a leak. He was not a cousin passing through town. He was the man Megan had started mentioning at dinner with a softness she tried to disguise as nostalgia. College stories, old jokes, a reunion lunch that became drinks. Drinks that became late texts that became this. Nathan looked at the mantel, where 2 silver candlesticks stood beside a bowl Megan had bought in Chicago with his card, and called theirs. "I am not questioning whether you knew him," Nathan said. "I am objecting to him staying overnight in trust property after I have made my position clear." Megan gave a sharp little laugh. "Trust property," she repeated, like the phrase tasted ridiculous. "You sound like a lawyer." Nathan met her eyes. "No," he said. "I listened to one." The smile faded from her face for half a second, then returned harder. "You can document whatever you want, Nathan. I am done being managed." He did not answer immediately. He let the silence settle between them, heavy but clean. Then he opened his phone, typed an email with careful fingers, and sent it while standing 10 feet from the woman he had once planned to grow old with. "Megan, for the record, I do not consent to Derek Lawson staying overnight in the residence held by the Cole Family Trust. Any decision to proceed is yours and will be documented accordingly." He copied Patricia Reed. He copied Alan Price. He sent it at 8:03 a.m. The notification sounded small, almost polite. Megan glanced at her phone, read it, and smirked. A few seconds later, his inbox pinged. Her reply was only 5 words. "Document whatever you want." Nathan looked at the message, then at the pool beyond the glass, blue and still under the pale sky. He did not feel victory. Not yet. He felt the quiet click of a lock finding its place. Megan thought the email was proof he was powerless. She did not know it was the first clean line in a record she had just helped him build. Before Megan, before the marble kitchen and the pool and the white leather sofa, she pointed to like proof of ownership. Nathan Cole had been a 29-year-old warehouse manager in Fort Wayne, Indiana, driving through snow before sunrise with gas station coffee in the cup holder and a coat that never felt warm enough. He knew what it meant to build slowly. He had loaded trucks on holidays, slept 4 hours a night, and learned how to read freight invoices the way other men read sports scores. The first warehouse he leased had a roof that leaked over aisle 7 and a heating system that sounded like it was coughing itself awake. He signed the papers with a pen borrowed from the broker because he did not own one nice enough for the moment. That was the beginning. Not glamorous, not clean, just a steel door, a concrete floor, and a man stubborn enough to believe that discipline could eventually become security. By the time he met Megan at a charity breakfast in Indianapolis, Nathan owned 3 small distribution buildings, 2 delivery contracts, and a house already placed inside the Cole Family Trust on Patricia Reed's advice. Megan had loved the story when it was romantic. She called him self-made, steady, rare. She said she admired men who could build something from nothing. For a while, Nathan believed her. They dated through long work days and quiet dinners, through snowy drives and Sunday mornings when she would wear his sweatshirt and talk about the life they would have one day. He told her early that his finances were structured, that some assets were held by trusts, that his lawyer insisted on clean boundaries because business and marriage both became dangerous when people confused affection with paperwork. Megan laughed then, touching his hand across the table, saying she did not care about that stuff. She loved him, not his documents. Nathan had wanted to believe that sentence so badly that he mistook it for character. After the wedding, the changes did not arrive all at once. They came dressed as preferences. A larger house for entertaining. Better cars because clients noticed. A lifestyle account because she hated asking for every purchase. A kitchen renovation because the old counters felt dated. Nathan gave, not because he was weak, but because generosity feels like love when you still trust the person receiving it. Patricia Reed, however, never stopped doing her job. Every major change was written, reviewed, signed, and filed. When Megan asked for more financial independence 3 years into the marriage, Patricia drafted the amendment. Nathan remembered the conference room clearly. Glass walls, a silver pitcher of water, Megan scrolling her phone while Patricia explained each section. Megan barely listened. She signed near the bottom of page 11 and joked that lawyer language was boring. Nathan had winced at that, but he had not stopped her. Adults were responsible for their own signatures. Now, standing in the home she thought she could use to humiliate him, Nathan understood the value of every boring sentence she had ignored. After Megan sent her 5-word reply, he walked to his office at the end of the hall and closed the door softly. The room smelled of paper, leather, and old coffee. Framed contracts lined one wall. A photo of his first warehouse sat on the shelf behind his desk, the roof patched with blue tarp, the parking lot cracked, the sign crooked in the wind. He looked at that photo longer than he meant to. It reminded him that he had survived uncertainty before. He opened his laptop, downloaded the email chain, saved it in a folder labeled Trust Residence, and forwarded it to Patricia again with one sentence. She intends to proceed. Then he sat back and listened to the house breathe around him. Somewhere outside, the pool pump hummed. Somewhere down the hall, Megan was probably texting Derek, laughing at how official Nathan sounded. Let her laugh. He had built his life by respecting the fine print. She was about to learn that fine print had a memory. The tension in the Cole household thickened as Derek Lawson's presence became more than a threat in name alone. Megan casually mentioning his impending visit over breakfast, while Nathan Cole calmly placed his cup on the counter, the sunlight casting warm stripes across the kitchen floor and highlighting the polished surfaces that symbolized decades of careful planning. Nathan had already anticipated this type of confrontation. The meticulous construction of trusts, post-nuptial agreements, and controlled accounts forming a silent barrier against the chaos that Megan's words implied. He moved deliberately to the dining table where his notes and emails from Patricia Reed were organized in precise order, flipping pages to reinforce the chronology of events and potential breaches. He watched Megan pour coffee into her cup with a practiced motion, her expression a mixture of confidence and amusement, believing she had the upper hand because she wielded familiarity with the house and her own charm. Yet Nathan's understanding of legal structures and strategic foresight had long since established limits she could not cross. The living room beyond held the soft hum of a pool pump, the glare from the water reflecting faint light onto the ceiling, a subtle reminder of the normalcy that continued around them even as the silent battle for authority and consequence unfolded. Nathan took a slow breath, measuring the weight of every syllable and gesture, ensuring that when he spoke, it would carry precision rather than emotion. Megan's eyes flicked to the chandelier, the white leather sofa, the glossy hardwood. Each object she considered a token of her entitlement. But Nathan knew that every item, every asset, every account had been structured with foresight, with contracts, and with legal enforceability that allowed him to remain calm and observant in the face of her provocations. He sipped from his mug, feeling the warmth and stability of the morning while he mentally mapped potential responses, not rushing to confrontation but noting inconsistencies, opportunities, and triggers that could be used to restore order without escalating tension unnecessarily. He considered how Derek might interpret his measured responses, how Megan might misread patience for weakness, and yet Nathan relied on the strength of structure over spontaneity. The deliberate pacing of his strategy allowing him to maintain control while leaving room for observation and careful assessment. The sound of her heels clicking softly on the floor as she moved toward the window drew his attention, and he recorded the movement and timing in his mental ledger, each step, each glance, each phrase feeding into the comprehensive understanding he had been cultivating since the morning began. Nathan's hand hovered over his notebook, pen ready to document any verbal or nonverbal cues that might inform next steps. Knowing that control resided not in confrontation but in preparation, that the house itself, with its polished counters and carefully maintained trust structures, was a silent ally in asserting boundaries and ensuring consequences. And as Megan continued speaking lightly about Derek's previous visits and her intentions, Nathan remained seated, composed, collecting evidence, measuring tone, and preparing for the eventual moment when the facts, carefully compiled and legally sound, would speak louder than any heated argument could. The morning light shifted across the room, illuminating the careful arrangement of paper, pen, and laptop, marking the space as a place of strategy, patience, and disciplined observation. Ensuring that when the confrontation truly escalated, Nathan would act not from anger, but from a place of complete awareness, clarity, and control. Nathan Cole spent the afternoon reviewing every contract, amendment, and trust document he had meticulously compiled, the sunlight from the large windows casting a steady glow across the dining table, where printed emails, notebooks, and highlighted pages formed a clear chronology of Megan's actions and potential breaches. He sipped his coffee slowly, each movement deliberate, knowing that patience was as important as preparation, every detail documented for clarity and legal reinforcement. Nathan's mind tracing the steps from the earliest college references to Derek Lawson and Megan's casual stories, through the late-night texts, the subtle smiles, and the implied arrangements that had begun to erode the boundaries he had carefully set. He noted how her words, gestures, and timing aligned with patterns that could now be matched against legally binding documents. Every observation a data point in the meticulous record he had been compiling since the morning. He reviewed the post-nuptial agreement amendment she had signed years ago, scanning the clauses she had ignored or underestimated, realizing how the seemingly minor language on page 11 could now decisively impact her claimed freedoms. Nathan visualized the sequence of events if Derek arrived, if Megan attempted to assert control, and if the situation escalated emotionally. Each potential action already countered by documentation, legal notices, and the structure of the Cole family trust. He allowed himself a moment to consider the psychological dynamics at play, Megan's sense of entitlement, Derek's assumed influence, and his own role as the measured observer who allowed evidence and contracts to do the heavy lifting. He walked to the window overlooking the pool, watching the light shift across the water while tracing in his mind the chain of custody of each email, each text, and every financial entry that documented responsibilities and limitations. Nathan's attention returned to the table as he highlighted a phrase in the amendment that clearly prohibited overnight stays by third parties without consent. The action silent but potent, a preemptive shield against anticipated conflicts. He cross-referenced it with calendar entries, guest logs, and previously overlooked notes, ensuring that the record was airtight and would withstand scrutiny. Then he prepared a concise summary for Patricia Reed, noting the timeline, observed behaviors, and clauses directly relevant to Megan's stated intentions. He imagined the conversation she would have with her attorney, Derek's confusion, and Megan's frustration, and Nathan found a calm satisfaction in knowing that structure, patience, and foresight would allow him to act decisively, without raising his voice or creating unnecessary confrontation. Every movement, every notation, and every thought reinforcing the silent authority he held over the situation. The afternoon waning with shadows stretching across the floor, Nathan reviewed one last detail. The order of notices, the phrasing in emails, and the highlighted clauses, readying himself for the eventual arrival of Derek while maintaining composure, clarity, and control, understanding that when the confrontation occurred, it would be met not with anger or drama but with the firm certainty of preparation, legal structure, and careful observation, allowing the natural consequences of Megan's actions to unfold exactly as anticipated. Nathan Cole spent the evening reviewing every document, every clause, and every note that confirmed Megan's intentions and the legal boundaries she had already agreed to. The house quiet except for the soft hum of the pool pump outside and the occasional creak of the hardwood floor under his feet. The living room illuminated by the fading lights streaming through the tall windows, highlighting the perfectly arranged furniture and the subtle reflections on the polished surfaces. He moved slowly through each section of the house, imagining how Derek Lawson's arrival would play out, how Megan might react, and how the combination of observed behaviors and legally binding agreements would dictate the outcome without the need for confrontation. Nathan reviewed the post-nuptial amendment again, noting the precise wording on page 11 that prohibited third-party overnight stays in the trust property without explicit consent, understanding that Megan had ignored it in the past, but that now it stood as a decisive instrument in his favor. He checked the emails, timestamps, and cross-referenced them with his handwritten notes, ensuring every observation, every message, and every action was recorded accurately for a potential future review. Nathan visualized the sequence of events. Megan, laughing as she texted Derek, the subtle way she assumed control over the house, and how each movement and comment would now be met with the quiet but unyielding authority established by the trust and the amendment. He walked to the study, where the laptop and printed documents sat, reviewing the organized binders that contained financial records, property deeds, and the carefully structured lifestyle accounts, noting how each line, each signature, and each clause reinforced the limits of Megan's freedom within the agreed-upon legal framework. Nathan considered the psychology of the situation, how Megan's sense of entitlement and Derek's presumed influence might lead to overconfidence. And yet every potential action was countered by documented agreements and prior warnings. He moved methodically, checking each page, making sure the evidence was complete and ready. Imagining how Patricia Reed would review the compiled information and nod in approval at the thoroughness and foresight, he allowed himself a moment to appreciate the calm order he had maintained, the result of years of careful planning, work, and disciplined attention to detail. And as evening shifted into twilight, Nathan placed the final note into the binder, closed it securely, and set it on the desk, the quiet of the house a testament to the silent authority and preparation that would govern the next encounter, ready to meet Derek's arrival with patience, clarity, and a strategic calm that ensured the outcome would unfold exactly as documented, reinforcing the lessons of foresight, preparation, and controlled action that had defined Nathan's approach to both his life and his marriage. Friday evening arrived with the kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel important. Nathan Cole stood at the foot of the staircase in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans, one hand resting lightly on the banister, the gray envelope from Patricia Reed tucked under his arm. He had not raised his voice all day. He had not followed Megan from room to room. He had not tried to stop what she seemed determined to do. That was the part she mistook for weakness. At 7:06, headlights swept across the front windows, bright lines sliding over the living room walls and across the wedding photo still sitting on the console table. Megan appeared from the hallway almost immediately, dressed too carefully for a casual visit, her smile sharpened by the audience she believed she was about to have. Derek Lawson stepped out of a black sedan with a leather weekender bag in one hand and the easy confidence of a man entering a house he had already been told was available to him. Nathan watched through the glass as Megan opened the door before he could ring the bell. She hugged Derek on the porch, not long enough to be dramatic, but long enough to make a point. Then she looked over her shoulder toward Nathan, waiting for the reaction she had rehearsed in her mind. He gave her none. Derek walked inside wearing a camel overcoat and a cologne Nathan could smell from 10 feet away, smiling like he had won something simply by crossing the threshold. "Nice place," Derek said, glancing around at the chandelier, the staircase, the polished floors. Megan laughed softly and said, "Make yourself comfortable." Nathan looked at the suitcase, then at the entry camera above the door, the one installed years earlier after a package theft in the neighborhood. It captured the time, the face, the bag, and the welcome. Clean, simple, useful. Derek extended a hand, all charm and polished teeth. Nathan shook it once, briefly, politely. No pressure in the grip. No challenge. No theater. "Welcome," Nathan said. Megan's expression flickered, disappointed by his restraint. She had wanted outrage. Outrage would have made her feel powerful. It would have turned him into the unreasonable husband in her version of the story. Instead, Nathan stepped aside and let them walk into the living room. Megan offered Derek wine from the cabinet Nathan had stocked. Derek placed his bag beside the guest hallway. Nathan noted both details without writing them down yet. Some things did not need ink until they had finished happening. At 7:22, Nathan's phone vibrated. A message from Patricia: "Received your final confirmation." Notice package will be served tomorrow morning if the overnight stay proceeds. Nathan locked the screen and slid the phone into his pocket. Megan noticed. What now, another email? She asked with a little smile. Nathan looked at her, then at Derek, then at the gray envelope under his arm. No, he said. I already sent the only one that mattered. The room changed after that, though neither of them understood why. Derek sat back on the sofa, still pretending ease, but his eyes moved toward the envelope. Megan crossed the room and stood closer to him, as if proximity could rewrite documents. Nathan walked to the office door, paused, and looked once more at the house he had built, the room he had protected, the marriage he had tried to honor. Then he closed the office door behind him, opened the binder on his desk, and added one final line to the timeline. 7:06 p.m. Derek Lawson entered trust residence with overnight bag after written objection. The pen moved smoothly across the page. No anger, no shaking, just record. Outside the office, he heard Megan laughing a little too loudly. He let her. The trap had never been the house. The trap was believing there were no consequences inside it. Saturday morning came bright and cold, with sunlight cutting through the tall windows as if the house had decided to expose every surface at once. Nathan Cole was already awake in his office when the doorbell rang at 8:14. He had slept in the guest room with the door locked, not from fear, but from clarity. Boundaries mattered most when someone was testing whether they existed. Megan came down the stairs in a silk robe, annoyed before she even reached the foyer, while Derek appeared behind her in yesterday's shirt, rubbing sleep from his eyes and looking less confident in daylight. Nathan stood near the office doorway with a cup of black coffee in one hand and said nothing as a professional process server handed Megan a thick envelope bearing Patricia Reed's firm letterhead. For a moment, Megan looked amused. Then she opened it. Her expression changed one line at a time. First confusion, then irritation, then the pale stillness of a person realizing the ground under her feet was not floor, but paperwork. Derek leaned over her shoulder, reading faster than he understood. Notice of violation of trust property occupancy terms. Activation of forfeiture clause pursuant to signed post-nuptial amendment. Termination of voluntary lifestyle account access. Suspension of vehicle use privileges attached to the Cole family trust. Formal demand to vacate following the legally required notice period. The words were not loud, but they were heavy. Megan looked up at Nathan, the envelope trembling slightly in her hand. You cannot do this, she said. Nathan set his coffee on the console table beside the wedding photo. I did not do this to you, Megan. You signed it before he ever walked through that door. Derek's face tightened at that, and for the first time since arriving, he looked at the house differently. Not like a prize, like a bill. Megan flipped through the pages, desperate to find a gap wide enough to crawl through. Page 11 found her first. Patricia had highlighted the clause in pale yellow. Overnight presence of any person with whom either spouse maintains or has maintained a romantic relationship, following written objection by the trust controller, constitutes a material breach of residence privileges and voluntary benefit access. Megan stared at the words, and Nathan could almost see the conference room from 3 years ago reflected in her eyes, the glass walls, the silver pitcher of water, Patricia explaining while Megan scrolled her phone, the careless signature, the joke about boring lawyer language. That joke had matured into a consequence. She turned on Derek. Say something, she whispered. Derek lifted both hands, polite panic replacing swagger. This is between you two, he said. There it was. The first withdrawal. The freedom he had encouraged suddenly had no furniture, no pool, no car, no allowance attached to it, and his courage became very practical very quickly. Megan's mouth opened, then closed. Nathan picked up the gray envelope he had carried the night before and placed it on the table. Inside was a copy of his written objection, her 5-word reply, the entry camera still image of Derek arriving with the overnight bag, and the signed amendment. Clean. Complete. Boring. Invincible. Megan looked at the stack like it had betrayed her, but paper does not betray anyone. It remembers. Nathan spoke quietly. You have the notice period the law requires. Patricia will handle all communication from here. I will not argue in the foyer. Derek was already reaching for his bag. Megan saw it and understood a second truth almost as painful as the first. He had been brave only while Nathan was paying for the room. By late afternoon, The house had returned to quiet, the echoes of footsteps and conversations fading into the memory of what had just occurred. Nathan Cole sat at his desk, the gray envelope from Patricia Reed resting neatly on top of a closed binder, each page meticulously organized and cross-referenced. The sun slanting through the tall windows casting shadows across the hardwood floor, and he allowed himself a brief exhale, a small acknowledgement of control maintained without confrontation. Derek had departed promptly, luggage in hand. His previous confidence diminished under the weight of legally documented authority, and Megan stood in the living room, pale, silent, contemplating the consequences that had finally caught up with her, the previous assumptions of freedom replaced by the stark reality of structured boundaries. Nathan reviewed the timeline once more, highlighting the precise moments of documented actions, emails sent, objections filed, and notices served. Understanding that each step had been a deliberate measure to ensure that no misunderstanding, no impulsive decision, and no attempt to bypass legal authority could alter the outcome. He thought about the emotions involved, how tension, anticipation, and assumed leverage had guided both Megan and Derek into misreading his calm. Yet the outcome demonstrated that patience and preparation could outweigh theatrics and assumed control. The house, usually a stage for debates and negotiations, now seemed to breathe quietly. Each polished surface and carefully chosen piece of furniture a silent witness to the events that had unfolded. Nathan considered how Megan would reflect on the morning and afternoon, how Derek would recount his experience to friends, and how the precise combination of observation, documentation, and legal structure had dictated the reality of the situation without ever raising a voice. He leaned back, taking in the living room, the pool beyond the glass, the framed wedding photograph on the console, each element a reminder of the intersections of personal history and legal foresight. Nathan allowed himself a moment to appreciate the subtle satisfaction of a plan executed correctly, the house restored to calm, and control asserted quietly but unmistakably. Then he glanced at the camera above the front door, ensuring that every angle, every detail, every potential action had been recorded, an additional layer of clarity and security for future reference. As evening approached, the lights softened across the walls, and Nathan considered the lessons learned, the importance of foresight, preparation, and careful documentation in maintaining authority and integrity. Now, as viewers watch this story unfold, how would you feel if you were in Nathan's position, witnessing the power of patience, precision, and legal foresight in the face of challenge? And if you found this narrative compelling, do you want to see more stories where careful strategy and composure triumph? Consider subscribing to follow along for more insights into complex family dynamics and the subtle victories of planning and patience.